Imagine a huge mansion with more rooms than most people will ever see in their whole lives. Picture long, echoing hallways, glittering marble floors, and walls covered with famous paintings by the greatest artists who ever lived. Now, picture that same house today. Windows smashed, ceilings falling in, rain pouring through the roof, and graffiti sprayed over ruined walls where priceless art once hung. And this is Lynnewood Hall, and this is the story of how one of America's grandest mansions went from almost unbelievable luxury to heartbreaking ruin in less than 100 years. It's not just a story about a building, it's a story about dreams, pride, love, and terrible loss. It's about a powerful family who thought they had everything, and then watched it all slip away because of one cold night in 1912, in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. It's about how money can buy almost anything, except safety from tragedy. The ghost of a palace. Today, if you drive through Elkins Park, a wealthy suburb outside Philadelphia, and look behind a rusted iron fence and overgrown bushes, you'll see something strange. Hidden behind trees and tall grass stands a giant stone building that looks like a haunted palace. It doesn't glow with light, no music plays inside, no guests arrive in fancy clothes. This is Lynnewood Hall, and for more than 70 years, it has been slowly dying. When it was completed in 1897, almost everyone in America who followed high society knew its name. At that time, this place wasn't a ghost at all. It was a symbol of power and success. Built during the height of the Gilded Age, it had 110 rooms and around 70,000 square feet of space. It was designed like a grand French chateau, but made even larger and more dramatic to fit American ambitions. In simple terms, it was like someone took a European royal palace and turned the volume up. To understand Lynnewood Hall, you have to think about the Gilded Age at its very peak. This was the era when industrial giants in America were richer than many kings. Railroads, steel, oil, and streetcars created fortunes so huge that it's hard to even imagine them now. These men weren't just rich, they were mega rich, and they wanted everyone to see it. Andrew Carnegie had his castle in Scotland. George Vanderbilt had his Biltmore estate in North Carolina. And Peter A.B. Widener, a streetcar tycoon from Philadelphia, decided he would build his own American Versailles just outside his hometown. He chose a young architect named Horace Trumbauer to help make it real. A house built to impress the world. The numbers alone sound unreal. 110 rooms. But these weren't small bedrooms or plain sitting rooms. These were rooms with 20-foot ceilings, walls covered in silk fabric brought over from France, and floors made of rare marble from Italy. Imagine walking into a house where everything feels larger than life. The main staircase was carved from a single huge piece of marble. It rose up 3 stories and was so wide that 10 people could walk side by side without bumping shoulders. Walking down those steps in an evening gown or tuxedo must have felt like walking into a royal court. There was a ballroom big enough to host 300 people for dinner and still leave space for an orchestra and dancing afterward. There were 62 bathrooms. This was in the 1890s when many Americans still used outhouses in their backyards. At Lynnewood Hall, there was hot and cold running water, porcelain fixtures, and even heated towel racks. There was an indoor swimming pool with fancy tile work that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. There was a bowling alley, a gym, a private theater where the family could watch performances without leaving home. But the most astonishing thing wasn't the marble or the bathrooms. It was what hung on the walls. A palace built for paintings. Peter A.B. Widener was not just rich. He was also one of the greatest art collectors in American history. Lynnewood Hall wasn't only a home. It was a personal museum built to hold his treasures. Inside its galleries hung original paintings by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Van Dyck, Raphael, Donatello, Botticelli, Titian, El Greco, and many more. These weren't copies or cheap imitations. These were real masterpieces, the kind of art you expect to see behind glass in a famous European museum, not in someone's private house. In some rooms, the paintings on the walls were worth more than entire city blocks. The house itself was designed by Horace Trumbauer, a Philadelphia architect who was only 27 when Peter Widener hired him. Trumbauer hadn't gone to an expensive architecture school. He couldn't afford it. Instead, He started working at 16 as a draftsman, drawing plans and learning by watching and doing. He studied great buildings the way Widener studied paintings, carefully, obsessively, and with real passion. By his mid-20s, Horace Trumbauer had his own firm and had designed nice homes for wealthy clients. But nothing prepared him for what happened when Peter A.B. Widener walked into his office and said, in effect, "I want a palace. Money is no object. Make it magnificent. Make it last forever. Show everyone I've arrived." For a young architect, this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. How a young architect created a masterpiece. Instead of panicking, Horace Trumbauer did what he always did. He studied. He traveled to Europe with sketchbook in hand. He walked through Versailles and other French chateaux, studying the exact proportions of windows and doors. He looked at Italian palazzos, English country houses, and German castles. He filled notebooks with sketches of staircases, columns, ceilings, and the way sunlight entered certain rooms. But he didn't just copy what he saw. He combined the best ideas into something new. A neoclassical palace for an American millionaire who had grown rich not from royal blood, but from streetcars and meat contracts. The result was Lynnewood Hall. Imagine driving down a long tree-lined road. Slowly, the top of the building appears. Then you see the massive columns at the front. Finally, the whole 3-story facade comes into view, stretching wider than your eyes expect. Built from Indiana limestone that glows like honey in the afternoon sun. It wasn't meant to be modest or shy. It was meant to take your breath away. Inside, the entrance hall alone was larger than most people's entire houses. The floors were patterned marble. The walls rose 2 stories high, covered with detailed plasterwork. The ceiling was decorated by Italian craftsmen who had spent years learning their trade. And at the center was that marble staircase, sweeping up and splitting into 2 grand flights, so that anyone walking down it looked like a king or queen entering a throne room. Every major room had a purpose beyond simple living. The ballroom told visitors that the Widener family could entertain hundreds anytime they wanted. The grand library, lined with dark wood and tall shelves, told guests that this family cared about books, learning, and culture. And the art galleries were designed like professional museum spaces with perfect light and carefully planned views so that each painting would be shown at exactly the right angle. Yet Trumbauer also understood that a house this huge could feel cold and empty. So he designed small, cozy rooms tucked inside all this grand architecture. There were warm sitting rooms where the family could drink coffee in the morning, breakfast rooms overlooking the gardens, private studies where Peter Widener could read and think in peace. In these spaces, the house could feel like a home, not just a stage. Lynnewood Hall was built with the newest technology too. It had central heating powered by big coal boilers in the basement. It had electric lights, a private phone system that connected rooms, and even 2 elevators, one for the family, one for servants and deliveries. In 1897, this was high-tech living. Hundreds of workers, stonemasons, plasterers, carvers, and craftsmen from different countries worked for 3 years to bring Trumbauer's designs to life. When the mansion was finally finished, Horace Trumbauer was only 30 years old. He had already created the greatest work of his career. The house seemed ready to stand for centuries. No one imagined how quickly everything would fall apart. The boy from a bricklayer's family. To understand why Lynnewood Hall existed at all, we have to look at the man who paid for it, Peter Errol Brown Widener. Peter A.B. Widener was born in Philadelphia in 1834. His father laid bricks for a living. His mother earned extra money by sewing. They lived in a small house in a working-class neighborhood, like many families in the city. There was no sign that their son would someday be one of the richest men in America. At 13, Peter quit school to help support his family. He worked as an errand boy and then in a butcher shop. By 19, he had saved enough to buy his own small butcher shop. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. Then history changed his life. The Civil War broke out, and Peter Widener got a contract to supply meat to the Union Army. It was hard work, buying cattle, slaughtering them, and moving meat to army camps, but it was also extremely profitable. Widener was tough, organized, and not afraid to make hard choices. By the end of the war, he had enough money to start investing. He noticed something many people ignored. In the 1870s, American cities were growing fast, and people needed a way to travel from their homes to jobs and shops. Horse-drawn streetcars were becoming the main way to move around crowded streets. Most people saw them as a normal business. Peter Widener saw them as the future. He started buying streetcar lines in Philadelphia, combining them into a powerful system. He made them more efficient and used his sharp business sense and his political connections to gain control. When electric streetcars began to replace horses in the 1880s, Widener was already perfectly placed. He owned the lines and had the cash to modernize them. He didn't stop with Philadelphia. He invested in streetcar systems and elevated trains in cities like Chicago, New York, and Baltimore. He bought rivals, pushed others out of business, and formed trusts that cut down competition. Workers often hated him for low wages. Reformers called him corrupt. Other businessmen feared him. But Peter A.B. Widener believed this was simply how the Gilded Age worked. Andrew Carnegie dominated steel. John D. Rockefeller dominated oil. Widener dominated urban transportation. If you didn't crush your rivals, they would crush you. By the 1890s, Peter Widener was one of the 20 richest men in the United States. His fortune may have been between $50 and $100 million back then, equal to billions today. He sat on the boards of major companies and influenced banks, utilities, and industries across the country. His opinion could make or break a business. A robber baron who loved beauty. But there was something different about Peter A.B. Widener compared to some other Gilded Age tycoons. He genuinely loved art and culture. He had left school at 13, but he never stopped learning. He read widely. He went to Europe again and again, walking through museums and private collections. He didn't just buy whatever was expensive. He studied, asked questions, and trained his eye to recognize quality. He hired experts to advise him, but he also trusted his own judgment. When he decided to build Lynnewood Hall, it wasn't only to show off money. He wanted a home worthy of the great paintings and sculptures he was collecting. In many ways, the house was a museum where a family happened to live. On the first floor, he created public gallery rooms, specially planned to show his masterpieces: Rembrandt, Vermeer, Raphael, Donatello, and more. He wanted to live surrounded by beauty and to raise his children and grandchildren inside a world of culture, not just cash. His personal life seemed equally successful. His wife Hannah was calm and practical, running the household and raising their children. Two of their sons grew to adulthood, George and Joseph. Both worked in the family businesses. George Widener married Eleanor Elkins, the daughter of another extremely rich Philadelphia family, which joined the two families' power. Joseph Widener married Ella Pancoast, who also came from a wealthy background. Children and grandchildren filled the family tree. Names like Harry, Eleanor Jr., Fitz, and George Jr. promised a lasting dynasty. When Lynnewood Hall opened in 1897, Peter A.B. Widener was 63 years old and at the absolute top of his world. He had wealth, influence, a spectacular mansion, a loving family, and a collection of art that museums envied. It seemed like he had built something that would last forever. That belief turned out to be his biggest mistake. A priceless collection in a fragile house. Walk into Lynnewood Hall around the year 1900, and you would be stepping into one of the greatest private art museums on Earth. In one gallery, an original Rembrandt, not a print, hung on the wall, worth more than most people could earn in 10 lifetimes. Nearby, a rare Vermeer, one of only a few dozen he ever painted, looked out quietly from its frame. Van Dyck's portraits of European nobles stared down with proud faces. A tender Raphael Madonna, a Donatello sculpture, and works by Botticelli, Titian, and El Greco lined the rooms. Everywhere you turned, there was something a museum director would dream of owning. Peter Widener didn't collect by accident. He studied art history, hired real experts, and traveled to buy from old noble families in Europe who were running out of money and selling their treasures. When an important painting came up for sale, Widener could simply outbid everyone else. He focused on old masters, works from the 15th to 17th centuries. These were not trendy artists of the moment. These were painters whose greatness had been agreed on for hundreds of years. A Rembrandt would always be valuable. A Vermeer would always matter. So Widener's collection was both cultural and financial, beauty and investment at the same time. The crown jewel of the collection was a painting called The Mill by Rembrandt. It showed a windmill under a dramatic sky, and Widener paid a record-breaking $500,000 for it in 1911, equivalent to many millions today. He hung it in a main gallery so every guest would see it first. It was his proudest possession. He didn't only buy paintings, he collected Chinese porcelain from the Ming and Qing dynasties, sculptures from the Renaissance, medieval manuscripts, royal furniture, and tapestries that had hung in European castles. Almost every room in Lynnewood contained something rare and important. His sons shared his interest. George Widener became an expert in miniature portraits and rare books. His son Harry fell especially in love with beautiful and rare volumes. By his 20s, Harry Widener had built an incredible collection, early editions, manuscripts, and treasures that serious scholars longed to study. He dreamed of someday giving his books to Harvard University and building a grand library in his name. But the very thing that made the collection special also made it vulnerable. It wasn't kept in a heavily protected museum with guards and alarm systems. It was kept in a private home. Yes, there were gates and servants, but in the end, it was still just a house. By 1912, experts guessed that the Widener art collection was worth between $5 and $10 million, a gigantic amount back then. It was one of the finest private collections in America, rivaling those of men like J.P. Morgan and Henry Clay Frick. Peter Widener, now 78, could walk through his galleries and know that he had accomplished everything he set out to do. He had risen from a butcher shop to the top of the world. He had created a palace filled with wonder. His sons were successful. His grandchildren were promising. It must have felt like nothing could shake what he had built. And then came the Titanic, a family at the top of the world. In the spring of 1912, the Widener family seemed untouchable. Peter Widener, 78, still took an interest in business, but spent more time at Lynnewood, enjoying the art he had collected. His wife Hannah kept the huge household running smoothly with around 60 servants. Their son George was 50 and seemed like the perfect heir. He was a skilled businessman who had helped expand the family fortune and a cultured man who appreciated art and books. His wife, Eleanor Elkins Widener, was intelligent and stylish and came from one of the best families in Philadelphia. Together, they moved easily in high society. Their son Harry, now 27, was Harvard-educated and obsessed with rare books. He talked constantly about building a library for Harvard that would hold his collection. Harry seemed to have the same burning passion for books that his grandfather had for streetcars and art. The family traveled like American royalty. When they took trains, they used private rail cars with bedrooms, sitting rooms, and dining areas paneled in polished wood. When they arrived in New York, the best hotels welcomed them. When they sailed to Europe, they booked first-class cabins on the finest ships. At Lynnewood Hall, life was carefully choreographed. Breakfast was served on expensive china. Mornings might be spent in the library or galleries. Afternoons could be for business meetings, social calls, or drives in horse-drawn carriages and, later, luxury automobiles. Evenings often meant large dinners with powerful guests. Behind the scenes, servants cleaned, cooked, and carried, making life seem effortless for the family. George and Eleanor had 3 children, Harry, Eleanor Jr., and Fitz, plus George Jr. The younger children were growing up surrounded by servants, art, and endless comfort. To them, the mansion was just home, but no amount of comfort could protect them from what was coming. That spring, George decided to take Eleanor and Harry on a trip to Europe. They would visit art galleries, buy new pieces for their collections, and enjoy Paris and London in the springtime. When it was time to return home, they booked passage on a brand new ship, the largest, most luxurious ocean liner ever built, RMS Titanic. Of course, they traveled first class, a floating palace at sea. On April 10, 1912, the Wideners boarded Titanic at Cherbourg, France. Their first-class suite was as luxurious as any top hotel. The dining room was famous for its fine food. Other first-class passengers included some of the richest and most important people in America: John Jacob Astor IV, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidore and Ada Strauss, co-owner of Macy's. For people like George and Eleanor, this felt almost normal. These were their peers. Harry Widener was thrilled. In London, he had bought a rare book by Francis Bacon, an edition from the 1500s that he treasured. He carried it with him everywhere. On board, he met other educated passengers and spent hours in the ship's library talking about books and plans for the future. Maybe he'd start on that library sooner than he thought. Eleanor enjoyed the trip in her own way, shopping in the ship's boutiques, writing letters, and socializing. Everyone recognized the Widener name. People wanted to be seen talking to them. The trip was both exciting and exhausting. George relaxed more than he could at home. Away from constant business pressures, he could simply spend time with his wife and son, dine formally, and walk the decks under the open sky. On the night of April 14th, George and Eleanor hosted a dinner party at the ship's a la carte restaurant. The food was rich, the wine expensive, and the conversation lively. Important people came by their table. Captain Edward Smith stopped to chat. It felt like any other luxurious evening in their world. At some point, Harry excused himself. He was tired and wanted to read his precious Francis Bacon book in his cabin. His father teased him for always having his nose in a book. His mother kissed his cheek goodnight. They would see him in the morning. None of them knew that this was the last time they would be together. At 11:40 p.m., Titanic hit an iceberg. Women and children first. At first, the impact didn't seem terrifying. Passengers felt a strange shudder and a slight grinding noise, but the huge ship didn't suddenly tilt or throw people around. Many people kept eating, drinking, and talking. The ship was supposed to be unsinkable. That idea had been repeated so often that people believed it without question. But below the waterline, the iceberg had ripped open the hull. Soon, stewards moved through the ship, asking passengers to put on life jackets and go up on deck. As a precaution, there was still no screaming, no rush. People joked and wondered what was happening. In the Widener's suite, George and Eleanor prepared to go on deck. They told the steward to fetch Harry. They put on warmer clothes and coats. Somewhere in that confusion, they understood that something might be seriously wrong. On deck, the situation slowly turned from confusing to terrifying. Lifeboats were being uncovered. Officers were shouting orders. The ship began to tilt ever so slightly. The cold night air bit into faces and hands. The sea around them was black and endless. There was one rule everyone knew: women and children first. For wealthy men like George and famous men like John Jacob Astor, this rule meant something important. In their world, honor required that they accept danger so others could live. Getting into a lifeboat while women waited on deck would be seen as cowardly. An officer approached Eleanor and told her it was time to get into a boat. George understood immediately. He pulled his wife forward, insisting she had to go. She resisted, not wanting to leave him and Harry behind. She still believed this would all work out. Maybe they were overreacting, maybe they would all be rescued together. But George thought of their younger children back at Lynnewood Hall, Eleanor Jr., Fitz, and George Jr. They needed their mother. He told her so. He insisted. His voice grew firm. She had to go. Harry, still clutching his rare Francis Bacon book, tried to hand it to his mother so she could keep it safe. She refused and told him to keep it. She still could not accept that they might not see each other again. In the end, George practically lifted Eleanor into the lifeboat. The boat began to lower into the freezing dark. As she dropped away from the deck, she looked up. George tried to smile, to look calm and strong. Harry raised a hand and waved. They were trying to comfort her, to act as if they would all be together again soon. It was the last time she ever saw them, the night the unsinkable ship disappeared. As lifeboats went down into the water, many were not even full. People didn't want to leave the apparent safety of the huge ship for a small boat in the ocean. Some still thought everything would be fine. On deck, men smoked, talked, and pretended not to be worried. The band kept playing cheerful music. It was a strange mix of calm and panic. George and Harry Widener stayed together, along with their loyal manservant, Edwin Keeping, who refused to leave their side. They helped other women into boats. They waited as more and more lifeboats lowered away. The ship's angle grew steeper. Water reached more decks. Now, nobody could pretend everything was fine. Around 2:00 a.m., the bow of Titanic sank under the surface. The stern rose high into the air. People slipped and slid along the deck as it tilted. Some jumped into the water. George and Harry may have spoken quietly about home, about Lynnewood, about future plans that would never happen. Or they may have said nothing, knowing that words could change nothing. We can't know what passed between them in those final minutes. At 2:20 a.m., the ship broke in half. Lights flickered and went out. The stern, where many still clung, rose straight up and then plunged downward. The people still on board were thrown into the sea. The water was around 28 vibes. In such cold, you don't last long. Your muscles freeze, your heart struggles. Most people die within minutes from cold shock and hypothermia, not drowning slowly. George Widener, Harry Widener, and Edwin Keeping all perished in that black, icy water, along with more than 1,500 others. Far away in lifeboat number 4, Eleanor Widener watched the gigantic ship's lights vanish into the darkness and heard the screams of hundreds of people in the water. Those sounds would stay with her for the rest of her life. Other women in the boat also watched, waiting and hoping their husbands and sons might somehow appear. Some people wanted to go back for survivors, but most boats stayed away, afraid they would be overturned by desperate swimmers. So they drifted in the cold and dark, listening until the screams finally faded. At dawn, the ship Carpathia arrived and started picking up lifeboats. Eleanor was lifted aboard, given tea and warm clothing by strangers. She searched the faces of survivors again and again. No George, no Harry. They were now 2 of the most famous victims of the most famous shipwreck in history, a widow in a palace of ghosts. Back in Philadelphia, in Lynnewood Hall, life went on for a short time as if nothing had happened. Servants still polished silver and dusted paintings. The gardens were still tended. The marble floors still gleamed. No one had yet told the house that its masters were gone. Then the telegrams arrived. Peter A.B. Widener, 78 years old, learned that his son George and his grandson Harry were dead. The man who had survived countless business battles, who had built a fortune out of nothing, now faced something he could not fix or control. Money couldn't bring them back. Art couldn't change it. Lynnewood Hall, with all its beauty, might as well have been made of paper. 3 weeks after the disaster, Eleanor Widener returned to Philadelphia with her younger children. The newspapers had written endlessly about the sinking. Everyone already knew who had lived and who had died. But seeing Eleanor step off the train alone, without George and Harry, made the loss real for the family in a new and painful way. They drove through the gates of Lynnewood Hall. The same building stood there, untouched by tragedy. The limestone still shone in the sunlight. The gardens were still neat. Everything looked exactly as it had before. Inside the front door, Peter Widener met his daughter-in-law. In just a few weeks, he seemed older. The proud, powerful man was now a grieving father and grandfather. He embraced Eleanor, and the 2 people who had lost the most tried to comfort each other, even though there were no words that could truly help. The servants had prepared for her arrival. Her room was ready. Fresh flowers sat in vases. Her favorite tea waited on a tray. They wanted to make things easier, but nothing could make this situation normal. Now the house felt wrong. Everywhere Eleanor went, memories flashed around her. The breakfast room, where Harry once read through meals. The library where George smoked and talked with guests after dinner. The galleries where the 3 of them had admired paintings together. All of those rooms were still there, still decorated and still perfect. But the people she loved were gone. The servants didn't know what to say. Should they mention George and Harry or stay quiet? Should they pretend things were ordinary or show their sorrow? Many chose silence. It felt safer than saying the wrong thing. Peter Widener tried to distract himself with business, but it no longer mattered the way it once had. He had built an empire, and now his main heir was gone. Joseph, his other son, was still there and capable, but George had been the one most aligned with his father's ideas and interests. Lynnewood Hall had always been meant for George. Now, instead of feeling like a bright symbol of success, the mansion felt like a tomb, building a library from grief. While grief consumed the family, life still had to continue in some way. The younger children needed care. Laws had to be handled. Wills and estates had to be settled. There were endless meetings with lawyers and business partners. Eleanor Widener struggled under the weight of her loss and her guilt. She had survived. Her husband and oldest son had not. People told her she had done the only thing she could. She had followed the rule of women and children first. George had insisted she get in the boat, but logic did not erase the feeling that she had left them behind. One thing gave her a sense of purpose. Harry had dreamed of giving his book collection to Harvard and building a library. He had talked about it constantly. Now, he would never do it himself. So, Eleanor decided she would do it for him. She worked with Harvard University to design and build a new library, the Harry Elkins Widener Memorial Library. It would be large, beautiful, and filled with books, including those her son had collected. Scholars would use it for generations. Her son would be remembered not just as a victim of the Titanic, but as someone who loved learning and helped others to learn. The project gave Eleanor something to pour her energy into. It was a way to create meaning out of tragedy. Peter Widener supported the idea. He understood the urge to make something permanent in a world that suddenly felt fragile, but no building, no matter how grand, could fully heal their hearts. In 1915, just 3 years after the sinking of Titanic, Peter A.B. Widener died. Officially, it was age and illness, but many people believe sadness and heartbreak played a part. The man who had built Lynnewood Hall, who had collected so much art and imagined such a long-lasting legacy, left the world knowing that his carefully planned family dynasty had been shattered. Lynnewood Hall continued to exist. Hannah, Peter's widow, and Eleanor still lived there for a time. The servants still kept things running, but the house no longer felt like a joyful center of life. It was becoming something else, a beautiful shell surrounding pain, an expensive problem no one wants. After Peter's death, Joseph Widener inherited most of the estate. He had his own interests, his own house, and his own life. Lynnewood Hall had always been intended for George. Now it was a heavy responsibility. Keeping a mansion like Lynnewood was incredibly expensive. The taxes were high. The heating bills were huge. The staff needed salaries. The building constantly needed repairs. It was like owning a small hotel that only your family used. Meanwhile, America was changing. World War I, new tax laws and social shifts made giant houses like Lynnewood harder to maintain and, in the eyes of many people, more inappropriate. During the Great Depression, when millions were out of work and standing in bread lines, a house with 110 rooms and dozens of bathrooms looked almost offensive. By the 1930s, Lynnewood Hall had become an awkward reminder of an older era. Joseph tried a compromise. He did not move into the house full-time, but he did not immediately sell or abandon it either. Lynnewood became partly a warehouse for the family's remaining art, and partly a rarely used residence. The staff was greatly reduced. Whole sections of the mansion were closed off, covered in dust sheets, and left in darkness for months at a time. Gardens that once required many gardeners now had only a few workers, and wildness began to creep in. The most important paintings and sculptures were still there, but Joseph faced a hard question. Should such great art stay hidden in a half-empty private house? Or should it go to museums where the public could see it? In 1937, Joseph Widener made a major decision. He gave some of the best pieces in the collection, including masterpieces by Rembrandt and Vermeer, to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., which was being created at the time. These works would now be protected and displayed for millions of visitors. The Widener name would live on inside the museum. But this choice also confirmed something else. The original dream for Lynnewood was over. The house was no longer the family's central showcase for culture. Without the art, it was just a very large, very expensive old building. After World War II, things got even worse. Estate taxes increased sharply. Servants became harder to hire, since people could get better wages and more freedom in factories and offices. Society was moving away from the world that had created houses like Lynnewood. By the 1950s, the mansion was effectively abandoned. It was still owned on paper, but no one lived there. The staff disappeared. Windows broke and were not replaced. The roof began to leak. Tree roots cracked old paths. The once perfect house was now a giant, slowly rotting shell. A palace had turned into a problem nobody knew how to solve. Decay, vandalism, and silence. Empty buildings attract trouble. Soon, vandals and thrill-seekers discovered Lynnewood Hall. They climbed over fences or slipped through broken doors and explored the darkened rooms. Some were curious photographers who wanted to capture the ruined beauty. Others were simply destructive. They smashed windows, spray-painted walls, and tore down what they could. They stole anything easy to carry, fixtures, metal, smaller decorative items. They chipped at the marble staircase, broke delicate carvings, and ripped out copper pipes to sell as scrap. The same intricate plasterwork that Italian craftsmen had spent months creating was smashed in minutes by people with hammers and no respect for the past. Local preservation groups were horrified. They knew that Lynnewood Hall was Horace Trumbauer's greatest work and one of the finest Gilded Age mansions left standing. They wrote letters, gave talks, and tried to raise money. They begged the Widener heirs to sell or donate the house so it could be saved. But the situation was tangled with trusts, taxes, and legal issues. The family either refused or delayed, saying it was complicated. Meanwhile, the weather kept doing damage. Every time it rained, water leaked through the roof into upper rooms. It soaked into wood, caused mold, and made plaster fall. In winter, water froze and expanded, cracking stone and concrete. Year by year, Lynnewood rotted from the top down and the bottom up. By the late 20th century, large parts of the roof had collapsed. Some floors were so weak that anyone walking on them risked falling through. The basement flooded regularly. The once bright ballroom looked like a bomb had hit it. The gardens turned into a small forest. Urban explorers posted haunting photos online. Grand staircases covered in graffiti, ballrooms full of rubble, long hallways open to the sky. People around the world were shocked that such a rare and historic building was being allowed to rot. But shock did not fix the roof. The ruin no one can quite fix. Standing outside Lynnewood Hall today feels a bit like standing at a crime scene. The ornate iron gates are chained and rusted. The driveway is cracked and overgrown with weeds. Trees and bushes block the view, as if the house is trying to hide. When you do finally see the building, it's heartbreaking. The stonework is stained dark with dirt and moss. Most of the windows are broken or boarded up with rotting wood. Parts of the roof are gone entirely. In some places, you can look through a hole in the roof, through collapsed floors, and see the sky from the ground level. Inside, the damage is even worse. The entrance hall, once polished and perfect, now has cracked and stained floors. The silk fabric that once covered the walls hangs in shreds or has vanished entirely. Spray paint covers many surfaces, not beautiful murals, just messy tags and rude words. The famous marble staircase still stands because marble does not rot, but it is scarred with chips and graffiti. Some of the carved balusters are broken or missing. The ballroom floor has partly collapsed into the basement below. Birds and animals come and go through broken windows. The art galleries are empty. The special lighting that Trumbauer designed means nothing now. There is no electricity, no paintings, only damaged walls and shattered glass. Rain and snow fall through broken skylights. The library where George and Harry once talked eagerly about books is one of the saddest spaces. The shelves are still there, but warped and moldy. The books they once held have long since been given away, sold, or moved. The room that once held conversations about rare editions and future libraries is now filled with silence and mildew. Below the main floors, the servants' areas and mechanical rooms are filled with standing water. The old heating system is a pile of rust. The kitchens are stripped bare, every valuable metal fixture torn out. Outside, the formal gardens are a jungle. Paths vanish under dead leaves. Fountains are broken and filled with trash. Statues have been smashed or stolen. The carriage house and staff quarters are collapsing. Again and again, preservationists have tried to find a way to save Lynnewood Hall. They got it listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which makes demolition harder, but that doesn't bring in money. Developers have looked at the property and done the math. To restore the mansion, they would need tens of millions of dollars, maybe 50 million, maybe 100 million or more, and then they would still need to find a use that would bring in enough money every year to keep it alive. The location makes things harder. Lynnewood Hall sits in a quiet Philadelphia suburb, surrounded by regular houses and streets. It does not have thousands of acres around it, like Biltmore. It can't easily become a resort or huge tourist attraction with hotels and wineries. Turning it into condos would be extremely difficult and expensive. Turning it into a museum would require constant funding. Local neighbors are frustrated. The building is dangerous and ugly in its current state. Teenagers still try to sneak in. One day, someone could be seriously hurt by a falling ceiling or collapsing floor. But the town does not want to take ownership of a giant ruin that could cost more than its entire budget to fix. So, for years, Lynnewood Hall has been stuck. Too important to tear down, too damaged and expensive to restore, and too legally complicated to easily sell. It's like a patient kept alive on the thinnest thread, slowly fading away while everyone argues about what to do. A last chance and a hard question. In recent years, a businessman named Richard Yoon, or similarly spelled, depending on the source you read, stepped in and purchased Lynnewood Hall with a plan to restore it. The idea is to bring the building back to life as a museum and event space, and to build other structures nearby to help pay for its ongoing care. The project is enormous. The house needs a new roof, new windows, new wiring, new plumbing, new heating and cooling, and serious structural repairs. The plaster and marble need careful restoration. Every system that makes a building livable has to be rebuilt. The price tag could easily reach or pass $100 million. If it works, Lynnewood Hall may once again be filled with light, music, and visitors. It will never again be the private home of a single family, but it might become a place where people come to learn about the Gilded Age, architecture, art, and the Widener story. But there is a hard question here. Should it be saved? Some preservationists say yes. They argue that Lynnewood Hall is one of the last and greatest examples of a type of mansion that almost doesn't exist anymore. It is the masterpiece of Horace Trumbauer, a man whose work helped shape American architecture. Letting it collapse, they say, would be like throwing away a piece of our cultural memory. Others say no. They point out that the same amount of money could save many smaller historic buildings across the country. They note that Lynnewood Hall stood empty and abandoned for decades while so many people needed housing, or schools, or hospitals. They ask if spending so much to restore a symbol of extreme wealth is really the best use of limited resources. There is no simple answer. What is certain is that Lynnewood Hall stands for more than stone and plaster. It represents the rise of a man who came from nothing and built a vast fortune. It represents the Gilded Age belief that wealth and beauty could build a sort of personal paradise. It represents the way tragedy can smash even the strongest seeming lives. Peter A.B. Widener tried to build for eternity. He got less than 1 century before his dream house became a ruin. His son George and grandson Harry died in a single terrible night aboard Titanic. The mansion they were meant to inherit died slowly over many decades. One death was sudden and shocking. The other was slow and silent. America's forgotten Versailles. People sometimes call Lynnewood Hall America's forgotten Versailles. In some ways, it fits. Like the French palace, it was built to show the world what power and money could do. Like Versailles, it was filled with art and fine craftsmanship. But there is an important difference. When we look at the real Versailles in France, enough time has passed that the pain behind its history feels distant. The palace has become a museum, a beautiful relic of another age. We can enjoy its rooms without thinking too deeply about the suffering and inequality that made it possible. Lynnewood Hall is too recent for that kind of forgetting. It reminds us that these huge houses were built in a country where many people struggled just to survive. It reminds us that extreme wealth and extreme poverty existed side by side. It reminds us that the people who lived in these mansions were not simple villains, but complicated human beings who loved art, loved their children, and still could not escape heartbreak. We are often uncomfortable with stories like this. They don't fit easy categories of good and bad. It's easier to demolish the building or to let it rot and pretend that part of history never happened. But there is value in remembering. When you stand outside the rusted gates and look through the trees at this broken giant of a house, you are seeing more than cracked stone and broken glass. You are seeing the end of an era and the limits of wealth. You are seeing how quickly a perfect life can crumble, not only in a single night on an icy ocean, but slowly, quietly, over years of neglect and inaction. Peter A.B. Widener wanted Lynnewood Hall to stand for 1,000 years. It barely survived 100. The story of Lynnewood Hall is tragic, not because it burned dramatically or was blown up in one loud moment, but because it died, the way some dreams do, piece by piece, roof tile by roof tile, window by window, while people watched, argued, and did nothing. It is America's forgotten Versailles, rotting in the suburbs, caught between the past and the present, waiting to see whether it will be saved or whether time will quietly finish the work that tragedy began more than a century ago.